Go ahead.
Welcome, welcome. I'm so honored to be here today. My name is Antoine Thompson, National Executive Director for the National Association of Real Estate Brokers. I'm just so excited to see you all virtually and glad that you decided to attend this very important session on strategies to improve and or increase the rate of Black home ownership in the United States of America. We're going to have a great discussion. I hope a very robust discussion about what can be done at the federal and state level to close this massive gap in home ownership in just about every section of the country. Uh, and I want to take this moment. I'm going to share my screen with you. So just bear with me, everyone. And then we'll have a very interactive discussion after that, okay? All right. I did something wrong here. Give me 1 second, everybody. Okay. All right. All right. Everyone should be able to see my screen. Again, Antoine Thompson, National Association of Real Estate Brokers. Every year we put out a report called The State of Housing in Black America. This one looks at trends and strategies to increase the rate of home ownership. Although this is not the norm in America, or at least in the Black community as much as it should be, but one of the things we do know is that home ownership strengthens families, and that's the most ideal situation, strengthening families. The National Association of Real Estate Brokers is the oldest African-American real estate trade association in the country. And one of our big programs is the 2 Million New Black Homeownership Program, which is a response to our annual report called the State of Housing in Black America. We affectionately call it the Sheba Report. And our 2020 report actually will be released on October 27th and at 1 p.m. Eastern time. And so feel free to go to nareb.com and you can attend this free event. We're having a national conversation on Black homeownership. At that time, we'll release our report. And so one of the big things is, as of June 30th of this year, the census estimates on housing pegs the Black homeownership rate at 47% compared to 76% for whites. And that's a quarterly estimate. And given the COVID environment, some think that both of those numbers might be a little lower by a few percentage points. But the fact of the matter is Black ownership is just over 40%. The white ownership rate continues to be over 70%, which is a 30-point gap, whichever number you want to use. Since 2015, when we launched this Black homeownership program, there have been well over 750,000 new Black homeowners, and that number comes from using the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data. That is where lenders have to provide their lending data to the federal government. So our Sheba report, State of Housing Black America report, is largely driven by that as well. One of the things I want to show you is that, and we have an updated slide that you'll be able to see in our 2020 report, but as you can see, the peak for African-American home ownership was in 2004, and it hit its peak, and then it's just been going down, 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 and as you can see, it dipped in 2013, 2012, 2013, and it's been on a kind of a roller coaster, so to speak, the last few years since the Great Recession. And during the Great Recession, as you all can imagine, the credit box extremely tightened. But I want to show you all as housers that this period from 2005 to about 2008 or 9 is when they had a lot of those bad mortgage and toxic mortgage products. The African-American homeownership rate was already in decline, whereas when we had good mortgage products, as you can see, it was doing well. And so whatever, as we move forward, we want to see African Americans getting good, applying, getting good originations, but we also want to make sure that we're getting good products as well. The other thing that you should know is that every year for the last few years, the number of originations going to African Americans has steadily increased. But the thing is that where we have a lot of work to do, we have still not reached the pre-2004 levels. And as you can see, in 2004, African Americans were applying in big numbers. And if we go back even prior to that, the numbers were even bigger, and then it just dipped, and we're starting to see increases. This is a very interesting map chart. I know it's a little fuzzy for you, but I want you to look at these numbers here, okay? So when we look at applications and originations for Black applicants, and as you can see, it was applications were 33,000 in the Northeast that one year in 2016 compared to 40,000 in 2017. But look at the southern part of the country. And this is something that we have to really look at. Even in the western part of the country where you all would be considered 29,000. And so it's a really small percentage of people that are applying and then actual origination. So you all's drop is not that bad in terms of how many applied versus how many got originated. But the fact of the matter is that we don't have enough people applying, right? We got a lot of work to do. The other thing that we want you to know is that Black borrowers continue to go to private mortgage companies at an alarming rate or at a high rate, depending on your worldview. Private mortgage companies have been more, probably a little more aggressive in their share. Some of the top, I think three of the top five mortgage lenders for residential mortgages have been private mortgage companies for the last few years. And so African Americans have been disproportionately going to private mortgage companies. And those have some good benefits, and they also have some bad benefits in terms of sometimes with pricing. So one of the things I think it's really, really important for you all as this group of folks is to understand why it's important to promote home ownership for African Americans, not just the moral part of it, but what is the economic benefit of it as well, and what are some of the socioeconomic implications of if we do more to increase the rate of Black home ownership. First is that it strengthens families, stabilizes neighborhoods, and it creates jobs at the local state level, and it impacts the overall economy. It's really important to note that the housing and the real estate industry impacts about 20% of the economy in the United States of America. So housing is a big thing, and if we can do more to increase housing opportunities and home ownership opportunities for African Americans, it will have a ripple effect on the local, state, and national economy. Over 40% of small businesses start in the home, and kids who live in homes that their parents own have higher educational attainment and health and economic outcomes. So it makes good business sense, it makes better community sense, and people who own homes are more likely to vote. So for all those that are in politics out there that might be watching, there's a benefit to promoting home ownership. So I wanted to show you all some quick cities, and I apologize, I really should have, I meant to pull your data as well. And this is pretty much consistent across the board. This is a quick snapshot of one of the local communities that we are doing some work in. which is, we call it DMV, which is DC, Maryland, Virginia area, for those of you who may not be familiar with that term. And as you can see, even though the Black population is significant in the city of DC and in the metro area, you will notice that the home ownership rates are decent, but they're always, the white ownership rate is consistently higher in these areas. This one also looks at applications. As you will see, whites are consistently approved at a denied at a lower rate. Generally across the country, we have two challenges. One is getting African Americans to apply, where in this community, they're actually applying at a, you look at the originations there, right there, 74,000 compared to 28,000. But to look at the denial rate, it's twice as big. So we got a lot of work, and that's pretty consistent around the country. Some communities it's even 2.5 to 3 times the amount of white. So it's about applying, but we also got to deal with these regulatory and also racial barriers. The real estate industry, for those of you who may or may not know, according to National Association of Realtors, Black people make up about 5% of those in the real estate industry, and just under 2% of those in the mortgage industry. So even though African Americans make up, depending on which government numbers you look at, anywhere from 11 to 13% of the United States population. So the real estate industry has a long history of discrimination and bias, and that's been also mirrored with the mortgage lending aspect of real estate. But let's focus on some other things. One is communicating Black home ownership. So as you all talk to consumers, to policymakers, to lenders and the development community, think about using these words, kind of word track as we say in real estate. Once we want to focus a lot on accessible, sustainable, and affordable home ownership. Because it's accessible doesn't mean it's sustainable, and just because it's affordable doesn't mean it's accessible. We learned that from places like Levittown in New Jersey, where the government funded affordable housing, but African Americans couldn't move there. Protecting the American dream of home ownership. Americans love this word, American dream. It is synonymous with home ownership and the word freedom. And home ownership also represents economic freedom as well. A person's home is their castle. That's one of the things we grow up learning. Growing Black wealth through home ownership. Home ownership is the #1 way that we create and transfer wealth in the United States. Those who own land control what happened on the land. We cannot close the racial wealth gap in the US without increasing the rate of home ownership. There's a lot of discussion these days about closing the racial wealth gap. As leaders in the housing industry, it is imperative, it is essential, it's of significant importance that you remember this, because we can have all the little league sport teams and get people summer jobs and get them businesses and all that, but they gotta own, to close that racial wealth gap. It's all about home ownership. So there's some things that we are advocating for as part of our effort to close the racial wealth gap. One is focusing a lot on advocacy at the federal, state, and local level. We'll talk about some things that we're advancing in that. Also, advertising and marketing to Black consumers on the financial and other benefits of Black home ownership. In a few slides, I'll show you how there are millions of African Americans, even in COVID and prior to COVID, that are mortgage ready. And it's our job to motivate them to become a homeowner. Activism for access to credit. in the reform and changing of regulatory policies that support increased Black home ownership. There's got to be changes at the state, changes at the federal level as well. And we need more mayors and town supervisors that are promoting home ownership, whether it's townhouses or condos or co-ops or your traditional single family or 4 units or less. Goals of the program also include community outreach, community development projects that foster home ownership. And we're doing a lot around training our members around the area of advocacy for home ownership. We need more single family developers of color for housing, particularly single family homes and condos and co-ops, not just multifamily for seniors, but particularly around home ownership, developers who can put more inventory out in the community. And we need training programs. There are a lot of builders and developers around the country that are African-American that can joint venture with folks in your area. If you ever need somebody to help in developing your state, send me an email or give me a call. We also believe that there needs to be a renaissance neighborhood strategy, kind of like the home ownership zones under Bill Clinton. And we need the state housing, state, federal, local housing officials really working with the Black real estate community and the faith-based and civic community to transform these neighborhoods, to marshal those resources, to create the climate that home ownership, Black ownership matters in your state and local community. One of the things that we stood up last October, and this is the 1-year anniversary of this particular program within our 2 Million New Black Homeowners program. It's called The House, Then the Car. It sounds really catchy. It is, but it also is really important. It's really important because according to Freddie Mac, when we talk about debt to income ratio, African Americans have 2 big hurdles outside of the institutional biases in the real estate industry and the mortgage industry. These 2 things that are within our grasp. One is student loan debt, and that's a barrier to debt to income ratios, and that disproportionately impacts African Americans. But this one right here is something that we can really get behind, and that's about the fact that Freddie Mac says that actual car payments for African Americans have an even greater impact in terms of a negative impact on the debt to income ratio for African Americans than actual student loans. So we know about how African Americans are disproportionately impacted by student loan debt. Well, you put high car payments on it and it's through the roof by $200+. So we have said, you can get you a nice car, but get a house first. And we often say at our association, National Association of Real Estate Brokers, if you have a Land Rover and you still have a landlord, you are in violation. So we strongly support getting a car before you get a house. The other thing is we're working on trying to keep persons at 40 years of age and older into get them into buying a house, keeping their home, and transferring that wealth as well. We do a lot with churches and civic and fraternal organizations to promote home ownership too. So prior to COVID, we are doing a lot of virtual events during COVID, but we do a lot of what we call community wealth building days. And in fact, we'd love to do one with your folks in different parts of your state as well to get millennials and all different type of folks to buy a house. We also, as I stated earlier, we train our members around civic and community engagement, and we work with a lot of faith-based organizations and other groups. Now, this is something I really want to focus on here. This is really, really important. This right here is what I talk about, the meats and potatoes of why we must invest in Black homeownership. So there are 1.7 million Black millennials earning over $100,000 a year, according to Urban Institute and Freddie Mac. And these individuals have good credit scores and solid employment. There are 3 million African Americans that are mortgage ready in the country. 3 million. All right, 3 million, meaning that we just got to talk to them, communicate with them, and help them understand the importance and benefits of home ownership. And so we are right now working on going to be running some radio commercials and some digital ads within the next week in about 3 markets in the country. We'd like to do a nationwide campaign, but we know that we have some work to do to really educate people about the importance of home ownership. But there's a huge market there. So for example, in Atlanta, Georgia, there are 109,000 African Americans that are mortgage ready. 109,000 people. In DC, there are over 150,000 in Metro DC. In Newark, New Jersey, in the metro area, is over 214,000. And I'm sure in your state, there are probably at least 50,000 or more. So there's a lot that we can do to increase home ownership. So these are just some of the things that we have done this year, some of the things we look to do next year. We have a thing that we call Realtors Week, which is every April. Love to see you all work with our folks there in 2021. Also, we do a lot of community outreach events and community wealth building days to talk about home ownership, real estate investing. In June every year, we do what we call Homeownership Weekend, where we have a consumer event, and we also do open houses around as well. And so we also do something this year. We'll do something this year around Veterans Day. Many of our local boards will. So part of this to advance homeownership requires some legislative changes. Now, I was nice today, and I didn't start off with how we got here, but it's important to note that one of the reasons why the gap in homeownership exists in the country is because of federal policy, right? And you know, coming out of the Great Depression in the 1930s, there were policies that were put in place to help white Americans grow the rate of home ownership. And there are a lot of great books on that, whether it's The Color of Law, if you look at the book Crabgrass Frontier, or some of those other books that talk about the different incentives that the government put in place to help white Americans, some coming from World War II through the GI Bill, and some just the suburbanization of America with the assistance of the 30-year mortgage and low-cost financing from the federal government. And why that matters is from the 30s all the way up to the early 60s, those programs were not made available to African Americans. And as many of you know, so that allowed folks to accumulate wealth from owning a home, able to start businesses as a result of owning a home, able to send their kids to college in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, and created that legacy wealth for a vibrant white middle class. So what we are saying that we must promote home ownership as a top public policy priority for public policy makers. We must protect the 30-year mortgage. In 2017, there was in the tax bill that was passed and enacted into law, it weakened the 30-year benefit of a 30-year mortgage. And that's been one of the selling points. There's probably some, people on both sides that think how we can strengthen that, but we need to reward people for being a homeowner. And different states do it as well, but we got to protect the 30-year mortgage because prior to the creation of federal support for single-family home ownership, it was very, very, very difficult for people to become a homeowner. And so we need to protect that 30-year mortgage. We also need to look at, we're also advocating for the expansion of or creation of a similar program of HUD Section 184. This particular federal program allows for Native Americans, Alaskans, and Hawaiians to get assistance from FHA and HUD towards the purchase of a home. It's a restorative policy. I'm sure that many of you are aware of many of the things that happen to Native Americans and some of those other protected groups. And we believe that it's long overdue that we have a restorative policy similar to this for African Americans, and all the things I can talk about that ad nauseum, from land being burned, being denied mortgages, and redlining, and all those things. Redlining was a creation of the federal government, actually under FDR. I can have a whole nother speech about that. The next thing is loan level equality. The absence of hereditary or arbitrary class distinctions, biases, or privileges in the mortgage origination process. This is really, really important. Pricing impacts the success of a person's ability to get a mortgage. When we talk about loan level price adjustments, overlays, adding percentages onto a person's mortgage based on what a lender may believe as perceived risk, that often is, we're able to document with a lot of smart people how that has been racially biased. So we want lenders to have measured risk, but we don't want it in a biased way. Currently, there's a bill in the House and the Senate called the American Dream Down Payment Act. And that's a great program that we want to see enacted in the first 100 days of the next Congress, which would allow people to save for a home the same way you can save for college, kind of like the college savings plan for home ownership. Really good. A few states are doing it, but we need a national program so that we don't have all these different programs across the country that are not similar. So we're working on that. There's also a program that we've been involved with for a few years to try to get across the finish line, and we're hoping that the next Congress will get this bill passed as well. It's called the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act. This law would allow for tax incentives to help people rehab homes that are not reaching their appreciation or appraisal values in certain distressed neighborhoods. We believe that this legislation is very critical to strengthen the neighborhoods that are undervalued and that need some economic vitality or renaissance, so to speak, in key neighborhoods around the country. The other thing is a national marketing and public awareness campaign. It has been well over 20 years since there's been any national effort to significantly increase home ownership for all people, especially African Americans. And so we're strongly advocating that the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, USDA, and HUD in particular really help develop and work with the private sector and folks like individuals like the folks on this call to really have a national campaign to advance home ownership. As I indicated earlier, there are over 3 million mortgage-ready African Americans in the country. There are about over 2 million that have thin credit files, meaning they don't have bad credit, they just don't have enough credit. And all the housing counselors are out there and housers are out there just getting them ready helping them get their credit, getting more credit, can actually create 4 million new homeowners. So great opportunity. So I forgot on this one to talk about state programs. So let me just go really quick to a couple state things, and I know we'll have 15 minutes for questions. So there's some things that states can do to advance home ownership. So number one, states need to know where they stand around home ownership, the disparities between blacks and whites. Where do they stand in the country? The second thing is looking at the current state programs. A number of the state programs are not as friendly as they should. And I haven't looked at your state, but I'll give you, for example, in the state of Maryland, where I live, and I actually am originally from New York, and I was in the state Senate in New York, and been involved with housing policy for a long time. So in Maryland, for example, we have a down payment assistance programs. And while African Americans of Fannie and Freddie mortgage products, they provide less than 4% of all mortgages that come from Fannie and Freddie that they purchase go to black borrowers. So if you have a state program and your program is modeled off their Fannie and Freddie, right? Meaning that you have a Fannie and Freddie program where you can use down payment assistance, and the credit score is higher than FHA, and that means that program is not really friendly to African Americans. So you're telling them to get housing counseling, right, to get into your program, but then it's a 20-40% difference between the credit score requirement for FHA and a Fannie and Freddie product. So that's a reform that we should make, that if we're offering a state DPA, that we shouldn't shut out FHA borrowers, particularly if any program you're offering is going to offer, they got to take housing counseling, right? So that's a reform, that's a fixable problem, right? And hopefully you all, if you're doing that in your state, you should fix it and make sure that FHA borrowers are not excluded from any of your programs. The third thing is providing more down payment assistance, working with your legislators at the state level and your mayors, et cetera, getting them behind getting more down payment assistance. I know in your state it is expensive to buy a home, but so down payment assistance becomes really, really important. Also, looking at the pricing that the county and city and the state is charging for new construction. Some of the fees that they charge can be exorbitant to build a new home. And what happens is those fees are just transferred right over to the borrower. They transfer over to the developer. Developer then transfer that cost to the borrower, and that impacts the cost. And so I have been trying to get as many people as possible to understand it. Look at your development costs that the state and local governments are charging developers and how that's impacting the buyers. Can we subsidize that? Can we further subsidize? Can we waive that? We know we're going to make that up in taxes or whatever. So let's look at those fees that are being charged on every new build, whether it's a condo, whether it's a single family or townhouse. Let's look at those. The other thing is that once the state establishes its target to increase the rate of home ownership in your country, in your state, let's set a goal. And in that, let's also take some of those same dollars that you're using to, because most of your state housing finance agencies or your state governments and your local governments have dollars for marketing. let's have a very robust marketing campaign around increasing home ownership in your community. With use focus on YouTube, focus on some of the Snapchats and some of the social media platforms, your radio. One state, the state of Virginia, their housing finance agency. You go to the gas station, right? They got a little commercial, at the gas pump, when you're pumping your gas. So some are using billboards, some are advertising in train stations. They're all different. Some are advertising in taxis. There are a lot of creative ways that you can do to create this climate of ownership. And so I'm going to end there. And I see we got a lot in the chat box. So we're going to go right to some questions, but thank you. All right. Are you going to read the questions or should I read them?
You can just sort through those.
Can you please share information about the event again? Oh, okay. First, question number one. Can you please share info about the event again? Thank you. Yes, the event is called the National Conversation on Black Homeownership. It will take place on Tuesday, October 27th from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. October 27th, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. It's going to be a fantastic event. You do not want to miss it. Do you believe redlining has been dealt with and stopped? No, no, no. Definitely no. We have so much to do. The Community Reinvestment Act, when it was passed, was a very weak law. In fact, it was recently weakened. We're hoping that in January that it will be strengthened and modernized with some teeth, and in connecting the dots between fair lending and home ownership, and really pushing lenders to provide mortgages to African Americans and others. It says, is there a challenge solely or primarily discrimination in access to loans and structured products? It's a combination. You have the industry, the way the pay structure is a problem. We don't have enough African Americans in the industry. The way mortgage loan officers are compensated is based on the value of the property of the deal. And so if they have a property that's in a Black area that's often undervalued, they're going to go to where they can make more money, the same amount of paperwork for a deal. Yes, there's an issue on products and pricing. If you look at what the, prior to the 80s, credit score was not the #1 indicator for giving out mortgages. It was supposed to get better, but it hasn't. And people thought that it would be less biased by using credit scores, and that is baked in. Discrimination is baked into that system. There are some questions coming to the chat. Prior to 2000, I see a downward trend prior to 2008. This preceded the recession. Why do you think that is? So remember, before the Great Recession of 2008, which I would probably say was really a depression, like what the heck we're going through now. There was a smaller recession coming out of 9/11, right? If you all remember, in 2001 we were attacked. We had a little downward cycle at that point as well. In terms of some of the major factors for the denials for African Americans, we have there are a few things that often stick out. So part of it is the underwriting criteria that is put in there. There's some of this automatic underwriting. Some of it is the fact that there's a lot of fallout where African Americans feel like they're asked more questions, provide more paperwork than whites. You have a lot of that goes on every time testers go in. They find crazy things happening. And then, you know, the other one of the things that we see a lot is this issue of the down payment barriers. You got credit, you got down payment, and you got race. Those are the 3 biggest things: down payment, underwriting criteria, and then race. And then what they do is, if you're in a certain zip code, you know, that impacts the valuations, that impacts risk in terms of mortgage insurance, or rather, I'm talking property insurance. All those things can drive up the cost for the person to buy a home. And if you have an underwriter who doesn't like what they're seeing, you know, it goes south after that. But pricing is a really big issue because you have 2 neighbors moving the same area. They get one says, "What's your mortgage rate?" 3.5. The other one says 3.5. You know, but what are those overlays? What are those additional things that what are the terms of the mortgage? You can buy the same neighborhood, work at the same office, and have a similar credit profile. And unfortunately, there's been so much data that shows African Americans are paying more. Would you say there are deficiencies in marketing outreach and pre-purchase counseling, or is the challenge solely primary discrimination? I think that outreach is definitely a big issue. Yeah, I mean, no doubt about it. It's discrimination. I mean, just last year in Long Island alone, they showed real estate professionals who were, you know, very affluent African Americans, asking them to provide a copy of their tax return before they can even see a house. And we're telling whites, just come on, you don't even need a pre-approval letter, right? So we know that some of those things happen on the real estate side. We know all different type of things happen on the mortgage side, from, you know, telling one person that I need all your rental history and receipts, to another person just saying, here, just fill out this pre-approval, give me a copy of your tax information, you know, your last 2 pay stubs or whatever, and you're off to the races. So some of that does exist. A lot of that exists. However, I want you all to understand that marketing and outreach is very important. For example, for me, I'm originally from Buffalo, New York, and the Black homeownership rate in the city of Buffalo is 27%. So if in some of these communities, the Black homeownership rate is so low, so when you are, it's not like the social norm. I own a home in Upper Marlboro, Maryland, and the African American homeownership rate is like over 3 times the rate in my town that it is in the city of Buffalo. So it's the social norm. So people are marketing, outreaching, there's housing counseling, and there's, you know, people are talking all the time about their home and all that. So, and you still, even in those good neighborhoods, you're still at risk for discrimination and exploitation. So yes, it is, we need to have housing counseling, but even for those so-called well-heeled Black folks, they are still vulnerable to discrimination. So in terms of getting bad mortgage products, getting people to refinance their homes when they shouldn't, and then the details, you know, as they say, the devil's in the details. So yes, marketing is an issue, but discrimination also is as well. I think I could take one more question because we're at 2:44. We're almost only got a minute left. Share equity homeownership is a good idea as well. Love that. I think that's a great idea. There's a number of models on that. And HUD Section 184 is a program, a FHA program designed to help Native Americans, Hawaiians, and Alaskans get no money down and low interest rate mortgages towards purchasing a home. We're trying to have something similar for African Americans. And I will end there. Any question? Anything else? All right, you can always go to our website at www.nareb.com or just nareb.com, telling my age. Just go to nareb.com, or you can look me up online as well. If you have any other questions, just email me at the website. Thank you all. You all were fantastic. Again, October 27th, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Time, the national conversation on Black home ownership. You can watch it live on Facebook, or you can participate on Zoom, and it's absolutely free. Thank you, and God bless, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Antoine. Appreciate it.
Thank you.